Hello everyone and welcome to this week's episode of Paranormal Living with me, your host, Jared Warne. So it is episode 2 of the brand new series, and over the course of this series I'm going to do some different topics, and obviously we've got different things planned. But this week's episode is all about the ghosts of Alcatraz. So Alcatraz, quick brief, is a place what's always fascinated me. I was lucky enough to go when I was about 14 years old. So back in 2007, we went on a family holiday. So we did like San Diego, LA, and San Francisco. And I got the privilege to go to Alcatraz, and I got to meet this lady who was one of the warden's daughters. And she wrote a book on Robert Stroud, who was the Birdman of Alcatraz, and about his life and stuff, which was an amazing experience. Probably didn't appreciate it as much as I probably would now. So hopefully, maybe one day do get to go back to San Francisco, and of course going back to Alcatraz, because it was an amazing place. Like I say, it's a place that's always interested me. I remember my granddad going and telling me, eerie feelings about the place and what an amazing experience he had. So it's definitely, again, on my bucket list to go back now and go back and visit the place. So what I want to know as well, for you guys to get in contact with us, to let me know if you've ever been to Alcatraz, if you've ever been on a ghost hunt there, because I do know they do some paranormal stuff. If you've ever had any experiences there, or if you know of anyone or any stories you'd like to share with us, please get in contact with us. paranormallivingpodcast@gmail.com. Of course, Facebook, Paranormal Living, and all the socials, YouTube channel, Paranormal Living TV. As mentioned, all the socials are in the description below, so make sure you check us out. And of course, share your experiences with us, your stories, because that's one thing I love since we've set up the podcast and obviously the stuff on Facebook and YouTube and stuff. Just the whole interaction with the group and this Paranormal Living family we've created. It's been absolutely phenomenal, and obviously so grateful, and I can't wait to keep going, and obviously the more people join in and these experiences we've all had along the way, it's been pretty amazing. So obviously a big shout out to each and every one of you who listen and obviously follow the socials and things. Now, I do have some exciting news. So this Friday at 8 p.m. GMT time, we will be live on our Facebook page, Paranormal Living, for the return of our live investigations. So it's been a while since we've done one. We've had some amazing experiences, as many of you have seen over the course of the last 12 months and plus. It's been phenomenal, and obviously the experiences we've all had and what everyone's experienced while watching and what people have told us and stuff. So I'm really excited to get this restarted, and this is more than likely going to be every week or every 2 weeks, obviously depending on work commitments as well. And then we also have quite a few other places lined up, which, these places are infamous with paranormal activity and what people have experienced. So we are going to Newsham Park on the 27th of February, which is in Liverpool. And this place is renowned for paranormal activity. It was an old hospital, and of course, I think it was an orphanage as well at one point, if I remember correctly. And the experiences people have had in this place on different investigations have been absolutely crazy. Some absolutely terrifying things have happened, and some obviously nice things have happened. So I'm really excited for that. It's a place I've always wanted to go. We also have 30 East Drive as well. So that is going to be obviously amazing. I don't know, you get very mixed experiences, what people have had. Some people have gone there and seen, Fred, I think it's called Fred the Black Monk, and had some, again, terrifying experiences. And then some people have been there and obviously not experienced anything. It's like things you could go on a different day and have crazy activity, to the next day it could all change. And I said that about the ancient ramin. So 30 East Drive is planned, and obviously we'll be announcing the date for that in the forthcoming days. So make sure you check that out, because, like you say, I'm excited to go there, and the infamous paranormal activity there is going to be cracking. We are also returning to the ancient ramin. So me and Jay went back there, I think it was April last year. It was a bit hit and miss. We had some sort of activity, but I don't think we sort of got into the nitty and gritty of the building. I think because we've been there once, and now I know what to sort of how the building looks, how it feels. Obviously, I think I could spend more time into different rooms and setting up different equipment. And obviously, the first time there, it's sort of overwhelming a bit, because obviously you hear the story, so your mind's going, and then obviously we sent a video from the day before when one of the chairs starts rocking by itself, these amazing experiences. So we are going to go back there, and we are going to be joined as well by Mark and Carrie from Paranormal Technology. So don't forget they do sponsor us as well. So make sure you do check them out. And finally, we are running our own event as well, which is on the 26th of February, which is at the Regent Cinema here in Blackpool. So I was lucky enough to go in that building when I interviewed Stephen Mercer right at the beginning of the podcast. And the place is awesome. It's got some crazy activity there. Obviously, it's now a antique shop as well. So obviously the mixture of energy you're going to get in there is going to be pretty awesome. And, you know, this thing's seen from spirits walking out of one door and walking to the door, and then someone walking after them like somebody chasing somebody. That's been seen, as well as, you know, noises, and apparently in the projector room, because obviously it's an old cinema and they still use it now and again for a cinema, the noises what come from there and things moving by themselves. So I'm really interested to see obviously what we're going to find out there. The ticket link to that is in the description below as well. So that is 9 p.m. till 2 a.m. in the morning. So I do hope you can join us on that one. But we will be streaming bits as well over the course of the evening as we going off into different groups and stuff. So again, I do hope you can join us, and hope you can join on the lives as well and be a part of our investigations. So let's get into this week's episode, which is all about the ghosts of Alcatraz. Alcatraz is located 1.25 miles off the shore of San Francisco. Over the time, the island has been used as a military prison from the Civil War. Local Indians have said it is the home of evil, and in 1909 it became the infamous Alcatraz. Our first report comes from Leon Whitey Thompson, who was an inmate on Alcatraz for 4 years. In later years, he worked on the island as a guide and used to give lectures about crime. 20 years after being released from prison, Leon was doing a tour. And while with this tour group, he noticed there was a shadow at the top of the corridor. A bit confused who it was, carried on giving the lecture, and the shadow was still staring at him. He couldn't make out who it was, so he decided to walk up to the corridor. So as he started walking, the shadow seemed to turn and walk on. When Leon got to the top of the corridor, he noticed there was no one there. The doors were locked, and there was no sign of anyone even being on the corridor. He couldn't explain it. While he was walking back and thinking of what he just saw, he got this overwhelming feeling that it was a friend of his, a former inmate of Alcatraz, Johnny House. Leon had not seen Johnny since the day he was released from Alcatraz. But he says in an interview, the way the figure held itself, the way it turned and the way it walked, it had to be Johnny House. But he knew he'd passed away quite a long time ago. He said he believes it was Johnny coming back to him to let him know that he was okay. Another report Leon has made was that he believes that there is many spirits here in Alcatraz, and for some reason they are trapped and they haven't moved on to the next plane yet. He also said there is a strange hold about the island, and for some reason he just feels the need he has to keep coming back, and it has a hold on him. Our next story is probably one of the most famous stories of a haunting at Alcatraz. So we go back to cell 1D in solitary confinement. For 3 days, an inmate who was put in there was constantly screaming, shouting, saying that he was not alone. There was someone in his cell with red eyes and that they were going to get him. Of course, the guards thought he was messing about and just ignored his shouts. This happened for 3 days straight, this person shouting and yelling about this person in the cell. Eventually, the guards decided to open the cell after everything had gone quiet. As they got into the cell, they noticed a gentleman on the floor had died with strange marks around his neck. Something they could not understand or explain how it happened. Since the report of this happening, a lot of people have specifically gone to cell 1D to see if they can experience anything. And on numerous occasions it is known that you have this cold feeling, feeling very uncomfortable, that there is something not so nice in there with you or watching you. Also this feeling of something wrapping around you and people have to get out. It has been seen on many paranormal programs as well. Dead Famous with Chris Fleming. He went into that cell and had these horrible experiences, as well as many other programs. And still to this day, it is unknown what that presence is or who that entity is, but they do believe that this was responsible for the death of that gentleman. Over the years, there have been many staff reports about paranormal activity, unexplained activity which has happened in Alcatraz. Our first report comes from a night guard. One of the nights he was walking through the showers and just got this uneasy feeling that he was not alone and that someone was with him. As he carries on walking, something touches him on the shoulder. He turns around and there is no one there. He is all alone. Still to this day, he can't explain this, and this seems to be a regular occurrence through quite a lot of staff's paranormal activity. On a regular occurrence, you can hear the cell doors opening and closing by themselves, even though the mechanism is locked. Whispers have been heard from the cells, inmates talking to each other, harmonicas playing, and even reportedly Al Capone's banjo has been heard in the showers and outside his old cell. Could Al Capone still be there? Our next story is the infamous 1946 Battle of Alcatraz, a 2-day fight between 6 armed inmates and the guards. As the fight was coming to an end, 3 of the inmates were cornered in the utility alleyway. There they were shot and killed. On numerous occasions, people have reported the feeling of being overwhelmed, very uncomfortable, and even a presence around them in that area where the 3 inmates were killed. Could this be the 3 inmates? People are unsure. But this story I'm about to tell you could possibly give us the answers. In 1982, local radio DJ Ted White, who was a known skeptic at the time, was invited to Alcatraz for a paranormal investigation with a local medium. After quite a few hours, Ted wasn't convinced. There was nothing solid to prove to him that there was ghosts, spirits, or even life after death. It's 3 a.m. Ted and the medium arrive at the utility alleyway, where the infamous Battle of Alcatraz ended. While in the alleyway, the door is shut. It is pitch black. Ted, waiting for something to happen, eventually calls out and says this is stupid and that he just wants to leave. Surprisingly, at that moment, everything seemed to change. Ted then starts feeling overwhelmed, a feeling of anger, if not close to rage, and also this presence around them and below them, something he cannot explain. While this is happening, the medium reports about Ted's face changing. He starts to look different, as if being shadowed by some unknown entity, and begins to feel threatened, where she says she wanted to leave, and if she had to fight her way out of there, she would have done. As this is happening, Ted is becoming more and more angry. Explicit language is coming out of his mouth, and this feeling he wanted a gun. Again, something completely out of character for Ted. As he's mentioning this gun, he said if he had a gun, he would fire it. And this presence and this anger is becoming more stronger and stronger, to the point where the medium starts shouting at him and saying she wants to leave. And not long after that moment, where things seem to be taking a turn for the worse, the whole atmosphere changes. Ted's face begins to look normal. The medium reports Ted completely changing back to his normal self. Ted has reported since that he is unsure who it was, who the presence was, and where this feeling come from, but he believes himself that it was one of the 3 men, and he was experiencing what happened in their final moments. Finally, here are a few quick ghost stories from Alcatraz. Warden James Johnston. The first warden of Alcatraz was a man by the name of James Johnston. One thing about him is that he didn't believe in ghosts. This may have changed one day when he was leading a group of guests on a tour of the Devil's Prison of America. As Johnston was telling his guests about the prison, all of a sudden he stopped and the entire group heard an unmistakable sound of a woman crying. It has appeared to be coming from the walls. and as the sobs rose in volume, a cold wind swept through the room. Not one guest took another step forward, and Johnson could never explain what they heard. We mentioned about the incident in 14D, solitary confinement, but that's not the only place what they call the Thing has been seen. The Thing wasn't always reported in D Block. It seemed to roam the grounds. It also took different forms as its dark eyes glowed, and in the day an entirely different apparition appeared. Inmates, guards and other sources have spoken about the same thing, a man roaming the grounds in 19th century clothing. Records from the inmates in the original Fort Alcatraz have vanished, but there is some information that survives. Aside from the terrible conditions on Alcatraz, we also know that the 12th prisoner to arrive on Alcatraz was insane. It is believed that the energy survives on the haunted island, and the entity could possibly be the 12th prisoner. Welcome back, everyone. So I hope you enjoyed some of them stories I shared with you, and some of you may know them stories, some of you may not, but I hope it's opened your eyes a bit to some of the experiences people have had, and it's definitely interesting. So over the course of this sort of part of the episode, I'm just going to have a bit of a look and give some of my thoughts on the stories. And then obviously, guys, I want you to get in contact with me and let me know, the key questions are, do you believe Alcatraz is haunted? Do you think it could possibly residual energy? And there is, of course, the stone tape theory as well, where is it a video clip? Because a lot of the sounds and some of the things people have heard as well as seen, is it just like the video clips? Again, is it just things on repeat? Or is it even just a rational explanation to some of the things that have happened, where just because it's an eerie place, obviously the history of the place, and you hear obviously about the paranormal side of it, does it naturally send something in your brain or trigger something to think you've heard something when maybe you haven't? So that's what I want to know, and that's obviously what we're sort of going to have a think about on this part, and obviously, like I say to you, to get in contact with me as well, to share your thoughts. The first story I mentioned was about Leon Whitey Thompson, who was an inmate at Alcatraz, and then obviously later on did quite a few tours and lectures and things. He unfortunately did pass away in 2005, but he was obviously a regular on the island working there, and everything you read about him as well, which obviously doing my research into him as well, and obviously different things, everyone's saying what a great guy he was, what a genuine, lovely guy. And, again, it puts evidence into the story as well. So he expressed obviously what he'd seen, and I was watching this interview about it, and he's physically in tears as he's talking about it, because he knows this was the friend Johnny House he saw. And obviously, from what I gather, Johnny said to him before, I'll let you know I'm alright. And I do believe for this to be that personal and the way he was about it, it's got to be real. Because people obviously listen to this, even people who don't believe, when you have an experience like that of seeing a loved one, who have passed, and that feeling and them sensations you get, it's real. It can't just be your imagination playing a trick. And that's what I love about this story. And you can see it, the way he tells this experience and everything he describes about it is clear as day. And it's got to be real. What other explanation could there really be? And like he said about, he got to the top of the corridor, the doors were shut, and obviously these are big, heavy doors. So naturally, if someone was coming in, you would have heard these doors slam, or the keys on the chain, or you would have heard something to be like, oh, it's just somebody wandering around, or is it a security guard? But the fact that it didn't look like that, and the way the figure was, it looked, the way it sort of looked like him, and the way it held itself, and the way it walked, and the mannerisms, no one else could have done that. And I'm sure he wouldn't have got confused, and he probably would have known if it was another member of staff working there. So in that story, I'm 100% believer, and I 100% do believe that what he experienced is real. And obviously it was his friend coming back to him just to say, I'm okay, I'm here. And from doing my research and from what I gather, that was the only time he experienced that. Although he did say, as I mentioned, about he does believe that there are many spirits there who, for some reason, haven't moved on. And again, this brings us on to, if they are there, why are they still there? it's definitely an interesting subject, and maybe one day we might find out the answers. And one of the stories I did mention, this is probably one of the creepiest stories, which is cell 14D, which is a solitary confinement cell, where the gentleman who passed away in the cell was heard screaming about someone being in his cell with him, and with the glowing eyes, and how terrified he was. And it was creepy reading about it. And obviously, do my research, as I mentioned, and obviously recording the podcast, it feels uneasy talking about it for whatever reason, I don't know. So, is it a rational thing in your brain? Because you've heard this story, and people who have been in cell 14D, if you are listening, let me know what were your experiences in there. But is it your rational brain because you've heard this story, and I've heard about these experiences some people have had? Does that put it in your brain, and that's why when you go in there you feel uncomfortable and you're like, is there something in there? Especially the feeling of something wrapping around you. That must be absolutely terrifying. And obviously that's been reported quite a lot. Or is it a protection? Even when you're in there because there's something not so nice in there, is that wrapping around feeling like your spirit guide's coming forward and putting that protection around you? Because I've noticed that on when we went to the ancient Ramin, I had a similar experience but that was like cobwebs. But it was like a protection from spirit. And I know other people have had experiences where they felt like they've had a blanket wrapping around them. And obviously it's the loved ones in spirit just keeping them safe. So that's definitely an interesting possibility, which we're obviously quite open to. But in talking about it, and obviously then I mentioned at the end about this entity has been seen in other places as well, and including inmates when obviously have had this experience of seeing this person wander the grounds. So who could it be? Could it be this prisoner 12? Who apparently got there and he was insane? Or could it be a spirit which is restless? Because as I mentioned, with it being the military prison beforehand, obviously they were treated absolutely terrible, to the point where they were just chained up against a wall and left. Is it someone who's stuck and, they're so upset and angry about what happened to them that they just can't leave the island, and they may not necessarily doing anything bad, but they just make themselves aware, and obviously, it's another possibility, or it could genuinely be something not so very nice, which obviously things seem to sort of point to. But it's definitely one of the creepiest stories. But because of the so many reports of people going in the cells and experiencing things and being overwhelmed and cold, and even as mentioned about Dead Famous with Chris Fleming, I used to love that program. He went and did an episode on the ghost of Al Capone. So obviously he went to his boat, from what I remember, and then obviously he went to Alcatraz. And I know it's a TV program, but he did go in the cell, and he was very uncomfortable, and he had a pretty terrifying experience from what I remember, and he had to leave. And there is that many reports of something happening, and so many similar experiences. There has to be something there. It's a bit too common to happen, and for there not to be something happening. But then again, the rational brain does like to do things a bit weird sometimes. So yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you have been in cell 14D, if you've had any experiences, let me know, get in contact. I'd love to hear them. So the main one I did want to actually talk about, which is obviously why I've left it till last, was about the local radio DJ Ted White. Obviously, he went to Alcatraz in 1982 on an investigation, and I watched the interview with him when he was talking about his experience. And obviously, he's a well-known skeptic, so I'm interested to see, because he didn't mention this, what his mindset was going into it. Was he closed-minded or open-minded? Because obviously, sometimes you do get open-minded skeptics who are like, possibly. And then you get people who are completely closed-minded and everything's a load of coswallop, and obviously there's no such thing as ghost, afterlife, whatever. And I've got some friends like that who don't believe in anything, but they're probably that close-minded that if something did happen, they just pass it off and whatever. And I remember talking to a friend of mine about this who doesn't believe it. He's like, I've never had an experience, but I don't believe. I'm like, well, something possibly could have happened, like I said. But you just dismissed it. And he's like, yeah, possibly. But again, he, as I mentioned, doesn't believe. So this is what I'm interested to see, what his mindset would have been going in this. Would he have been, all right, let's see if you can prove to me that there is ghosts, such thing as ghosts, afterlife, la la. Or has he gone in like, yeah, it's a lot of rubbish, but we'll go for a bit of a crack. And then obviously he does the investigation. Bits and bobs are happening, nothing obviously too much, as he mentions. But it's when they got to the utility sort of corridor, and I remember seeing that myself. And you see all the pipes. It's quite cool. And obviously they were locked in there, and that's when things went south pretty fast. So obviously he'd been in there for, I guess, 5-10 minutes maybe, and then he started saying, "This load of rubbish, this, no such thing," and starts doubting, which seems to stir things up. So what is it, because of what he said that things got stirred up, and it's like, right, we'll show you. You're going to have an experience, or was it because they thought he was being disrespectful, and they're like, right, we'll show you. So that's another interesting point. And then obviously as this is happening, he starts to be shadowed, and obviously this lady who's within the medium mentions his face changing and how his body language is changing, and he was saying that he's getting really aggressive to the point where he just wants to like throttle somebody, and he said if he had a gun he would have shot it. And this battle's going on, and about this presence being around him. This is an experience which has to be true. For him to be a skeptic and obviously doesn't believe in anything, and then to have this and remember what happened, it's not something he's going to lie about. If nothing happened, he'd say nothing happened. And the way, again, about him shadowing, which I've seen myself, and I imagine quite a few of the listeners have seen this, especially when sometimes you're in a spiritualist church and you see the medium on the rostrum and the face seems to change sometimes. That's another perfect part of shadowing. And obviously he mentioned afterwards he believes it was the 3 men who had been shot, and he's picking up on their emotions or their final moments maybe. But overall, what an amazing experience to have. So I'd love to hear your thoughts, guys, on this. But like I say, I 100% believe this story. And have you ever been in the utility alleyway? Ever had that experience? Or had something similar happen to you? Or maybe nothing's happened. But yeah, please do get in contact with some of the stories. Or if you have, like I say, your own stories in regards to the experiences at Alcatraz. Because I'd love to hear them, and then I can share them, obviously, with the listeners. So this brings us to the question. Is Alcatraz really haunted? And my personal belief is yes. I think, as I mentioned over the course of the episode, there's too many coincidences and very similar experiences people have had for there not to be anything there. And I was talking to some friends the other day, Mark and Carrie from Paranormal Technology, and they went to a haunted jail and did a paranormal investigation in Ireland. And the experiences they had were pretty phenomenal, where they heard very similar things going on, hearing the jail cells open and closing, and hearing whispering and footsteps. So again, very similar things. Are the spirits there because this is all they've known? Have they just been in prison and in these cells all their lives, and that's what they're used to, and that's why they've decided to stay? Are they stuck? Are they looking for help? It's another road we can go down, and maybe one day we might obviously get some answers. And is it also possibly a learning curve for them having to come back, and this is maybe where you went wrong before you can move on to the next part? Obviously, who knows? But maybe one day Paranormal Living will get to go to Alcatraz for a proper paranormal experience, or even just to get to go back myself on holiday and have a walk around the place and, sort of see what vibes we pick up and what different energy we can pick up and stuff, and possibly if anyone comes forward. So it's going to leave it open at that one, but as I mentioned, please do get in contact with me and send us an email. All the links are below in the description, and let me know your thoughts. So that's it for this week's podcast. I do hope you've enjoyed it, and this look into the ghosts of Alcatraz. I've absolutely loved it. And I would like to say, don't forget we are live tomorrow night, Tuesday, at 7:30 p.m. for Paranormal Tuesday, which is our weekly vodcast, live on Facebook. And obviously every week we talk about different topics. And then, of course, we are live on Friday night from 8 p.m. on our Facebook page as well for our paranormal investigation night. So make sure you come and join us on that one as well. And come and join in and obviously share your experiences with us and what you see and what you hear. And then, of course, we will have a podcast again next week. Take care, everyone. Love and light. Adios.